The chow lines stretched across the yard, boots grinding into the sun-baked dirt of Camp Hawthorne. July in Arizona turned the air into a furnace, heat waves dancing above the asphalt like ghosts. 200 soldiers stood in formation, sweat darkening their tan uniforms while they waited. Tempers ran short, jokes cut sharper than usual. Private First Class Alexis Lexi Morgan stood in line like everyone else. Her clipboard pressed against her chest, sleeves rolled just above the wrist. That was all it took. The butterfly tattoo on her forearm caught the eye of a group of infantry soldiers behind her. Sergeant Ryan Hayes smirked loud enough for the others to hear. What's she going to do, flutter at the enemy? Laughter broke out, a ripple of amusement at her expense. Lexi didn't flinch. She didn't turn. She just kept her eyes forward, tray steady in her hands, silence her only defense. They thought they knew who she was. They didn't. Private First Class Alexis Morgan was 28 years old, assigned to the Logistics Division at Camp Hawthorne. Her world wasn't firefights or night raids. It was clipboards, manifests, and endless stacks of supply reports. While others trained for combat, she made sure they had the gear to survive it. Every morning she arrived early, boots polished to a mirror shine. Her bunk was squared away, paperwork flawless. She never raised her voice, never complained, never cut corners. If a shipment was missing, Lexi found it. If her report was due tomorrow, Lexi had already finished it the night before. But in the eyes of most infantrymen, none of that mattered. To them, she wasn't a fighter, wasn't real army. She was just another supply clerk, someone they didn't picture in the field, someone whose quiet presence could be overlooked without a second thought. The contrast was sharp. The men who mocked her were loud, brash, convinced that worth was measured in calluses and combat patches. Lexi was the opposite, soft-spoken, steady, humble. She didn't brag about past accomplishments. She didn't push back when jokes were thrown her way. She simply endured them. And then there was the tattoo, a single butterfly. Black ink spread across the pale skin of her forearm. To most, it looked out of place on a soldier. Feminine, fragile, a decoration that didn't belong beside a uniform and dog tags. In the chow hall, whispers always started when someone noticed it. She got that on spring break, someone would mutter. What's she going to do, flap her wings at the Taliban? The laughter that followed never seemed to touch her. Lexi never explained, not once. She kept her sleeves rolled just high enough that the ink was always visible. Whether it was stubbornness, pride, or something else entirely, no one knew. But she never defended it, never offered a story, never gave them what they wanted. To her fellow soldiers, it was a joke. To Alexis Morgan, it was something else entirely. The first time it happened in front of a foreign nation, Lexi told herself it didn't matter. They were standing in the yard for a routine briefing when Sergeant Hayes caught sight of her tattoo. He smirked, then turned to the entire group. "Look at that, AM," he said, grabbing her wrist and holding it up for everyone to see. "Private Morgan here thinks she's at a butterfly garden. What's this supposed to be? Morgan, your spirit animal." A ripple of laughter moved through the ranks. Lexi didn't pull her arm back. She just let the silence sit, eyes locked forward, jaw tight. Hayes eventually dropped her wrist and moved on, but the damage lingered. To everyone watching, she was fair game. It spread to the motor pool. One hot afternoon, two soldiers leaned against a Humvee, cigarettes dangling from their lips, watching her walk past with a clipboard. "I'll put 20 on it," one said loud enough for her to hear. "She couldn't even load this truck without breaking a nail." The other chuckled. "You're on. No way she even knows where the tie-down points are." Lexi kept walking. She didn't flinch, didn't fire back. But in the reflection of the Humvee's side mirror, her eyes burned for just a moment before softening again. She disappeared into the warehouse and the laughter followed her. It got worse in the chow hall. She balanced her tray, careful as always, when Private Wilson brushed past too close. The tray slipped. Metal clattered against the floor. Food scattered across the tiles. The hall erupted. Some jeered. One clapped sarcastically. "Nice work, Morgan. Enemy's going to surrender now for sure." Lexi knelt, picking up the pieces one by one. No curse words, no anger, just steady hands, slow breaths, and silence. A medic bent down to help her, but she shook her head. She didn't want pity. She finished cleaning, left her tray behind, and sat at a corner table alone. That became her routine. Alone at meals. Alone at the supply desk long after others had gone to their bunks. The lights in her office burned late, her pen scratching across paper. When soldiers passed by, they saw her, hunched over letters sealed in neat stacks, but never mailed. No one knew who she wrote to. No one asked. Not everyone at Camp Hawthorne treated Lexi Morgan with contempt. Staff Sergeant Marcus Daniels, a 12-year veteran with kind eyes and a patient demeanor, noticed her work ethic from his first day at the camp. "You ever sleep, Morgan?" he asked one evening, finding her still at her desk at 2300 hours. "When necessary, Sergeant," she replied, not looking up from her inventory list. "These supply manifests aren't going to win the war by morning," he said with a gentle smile. "Whatever you're proving, I think you've proved it." Her pen paused. "Not proving anything, sir. Just doing my job." "Right," he nodded, unconvinced. "Well, your job includes being rested enough to function tomorrow." For a moment, her mask slipped, and something like appreciation crossed her face. "I'll keep that in mind." Marcus Daniels couldn't explain why, but something about Private Morgan tugged at his instincts. The quiet competence, the detachment, the way her eyes sometimes scanned rooms like she was looking for exits. He'd been deployed 3 times, seen enough operators to recognize certain patterns. But Morgan was logistics, paper pushing. So why did she move like someone who'd seen combat? He wasn't the only one who noticed Lexi. Private Taylor Rodriguez, one of the few other women on base, had tried repeatedly to befriend her. "You should join us at the rec center tonight," Taylor said one morning, leaning against Lexi's desk. "A bunch of us are watching movies. Better than sitting alone in the barracks." "Thanks," Lexi replied, "but I have inventory to finish." "You always have inventory," Taylor sighed. "Look, I get it. Being one of the few women here sucks sometimes. But isolating yourself just makes it worse." Lexi looked up, something unreadable in her expression. "I appreciate the concern, Rodriguez. I'm just not much for socializing." Taylor frowned. "You know, Morgan, sometimes I think you want to be alone." The corner of Lexi's mouth twitched. "Sometimes you'd be right." If Marcus Daniels showed Lexi respect and Taylor Rodriguez offered friendship, Lieutenant David Wilson provided the opposite. The young officer had taken an instant dislike to Morgan from his first week at Camp Hawthorne. "Your requisition forms are incomplete, Private," he said, dropping a stack of papers on her desk. Lexi glanced at the forms she'd spent hours preparing. "Sir, these match exactly what was requested. I triple-checked them." "Well, check them again," Wilson snapped. "And while you're at it, explain why my unit's equipment is consistently the last to be processed." "I process all requisitions in the order they're received, sir," she replied evenly. Wilson leaned down, invading her space. "I don't know what your problem is, Morgan, but in my experience, people who can't handle simple tasks like this shouldn't be in uniform at all. Maybe you should stick to drawing butterflies." His eyes flicked meaningfully to her tattoo. Lexi said nothing, but her fingers curled into a fist beneath her desk. As Wilson stalked away, Marcus Daniels stepped out from behind a shelf where he'd overheard the exchange. "That guy's a piece of work," he muttered. Lexi was already reorganizing the forms. "He's an officer. He's entitled to his opinion." "Not when his opinion is wrong," Marcus replied. "I've never seen more precise paperwork than yours." "What's his problem?" "Some people just need someone to look down on," she said softly. "It makes them feel taller." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "You know, most people would have cracked by now. The constant comments, the disrespect. But you just take it. Why?" For the first time, something like a real smile touched her lips. "Maybe I've dealt with worse than Lieutenant Wilson." The first real clue that Private First Class Alexis Morgan was more than she appeared came one evening when a private walked past the women's barracks. Lexi's locker door was open, a single photo taped inside. At first glance, it looked ordinary, a group of soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder in the desert. But the faces were blurred either by dust or deliberate smudging. Only one detail stood out, a patch on a sleeve half covered but distinct to anyone who knew special operations. The private lingered, squinting. But before he could study it further, Lexi closed the locker with quiet finality. The second clue lay in her tattoo itself. Under the harsh floodlights of the motor pool, the butterfly ink revealed more than wings. Thin lines cut through the design, barely visible, weaving numbers into the pattern. Coordinates, unit digits, something precise hidden in plain sight. The soldiers who laughed at her never noticed. The third came in the warehouse. A shipment arrived late, crates of weapons fresh off the line. Armorers gathered around, prying lids open, cataloging serials. Lexi, clipboard in hand, stepped forward. She rattled off the model weight and specs of each rifle before the men even finished unsealing the cases. "Morgan," one of them said, staring. "How the hell do you know that?" She just shrugged. "It's on the manifest," she replied, though they all knew the paperwork hadn't even been touched yet. These were not accidents. They were fragments of a life Lexi Morgan never talked about, buried beneath the surface. The men who mocked her saw only silence and a butterfly. The ones who looked closer saw shadows of something else, something far more dangerous. Late one night, Taylor Rodriguez couldn't sleep. She decided to head to the gym, thinking a midnight workout might tire her enough to rest. As she approached the facility, she heard rhythmic sounds from inside. Someone else had the same idea. Through the window, she saw Lexi Morgan, but not the Lexi she knew. This woman moved with fluid precision, striking a heavy bag with practiced combinations. Jab, cross, hook, elbow. Her form was perfect, her power surprising. This wasn't someone who had taken a self-defense class. This was someone trained to fight. Taylor watched transfixed as Lexi executed a spinning kick that would have made their combat instructors proud. When Lexi finally stopped breathing hard, she closed her eyes and pressed her forehead against the bag. Something in her posture spoke of grief, of memories, of ghosts. Taylor slipped away before being noticed carrying this new puzzle piece with her. The next morning, Taylor approached Lexi in the mess hall, sliding onto the bench across from her. "Where'd you learn to fight like that?" she asked quietly. Lexi's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. Her eyes, usually calm, flashed with something sharp. "I don't know what you're talking about. I saw you last night at the gym." Taylor leaned forward. "That wasn't basic training moves." Lexi carefully set her spoon down. "Everyone should know how to defend themselves." "That wasn't self-defense, Morgan. That was someone who knows how to hurt people." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Lexi stood collecting her tray. "We all have hobbies, Rodriguez. Some people knit, I box." She turned to leave, then added over her shoulder, "And some people should mind their own business." The inspection came without warning. Late one afternoon, word spread that Lieutenant Wilson was making surprise rounds through the motor pool. Soldiers scrambled to make order, out of chaos, tightening straps, wiping grease lining gear in perfect rows. Lexi Morgan stood quietly at her desk, clipboard at the ready. Wilson's gaze swept the room. His eyes landed on her. "You," he said, pointing. Private Morgan stepped forward. The room stilled. Lexi obeyed, boots clicking against the concrete floor. Wilson picked up an M4 carbine from a nearby rack and held it out. "Your logistics right, paperwork, supplies. Let's see what you really know." A murmur rippled through the soldiers. This wasn't a fair test. Everyone knew Morgan wasn't combat arms, but Lexi didn't hesitate. She accepted the weapon with steady hands. "Disassemble it," Wilson ordered. Lexi looked at the weapon once, then set it on the table. Without a word, she reached into her pocket and pulled a strip of cloth. She tied it around her eyes, blindfolding herself. Gasps filled the motor pool. Her fingers moved with quiet precision. Bolt-firing pin extractor. Piece by piece, she laid the weapon out in perfect order. No wasted movement, no hesitation. The clicking of metal against the table was the only sound in the room. In less than 2 minutes, the M4 lay stripped bare before her. The armorer standing nearby folded his arms. "I've seen guys take 5 times that long," he muttered. Lexi pulled the blindfold off, blinked once, and began reassembling the weapon. The final click of the magazine echoed like a hammer strike in the silence. When she slid the rifle back across the table, Wilson's expression was unreadable. From the back of the room, a voice broke the silence. "How the hell do you know that?" Lexi didn't smile. She didn't explain. She just lifted her clipboard again, as if the demonstration had never happened. "It's all in the manual, sir," she said softly. But everyone in that motor pool knew better. Her secret was cracking through, and no one could make sense of it. That night, Marcus Daniels found Lexi sitting alone outside the barracks, staring at the stars. For once, she didn't have her clipboard, didn't have paperwork, just the night sky and her thoughts. "That was quite a show today," he said, settling down beside her. "Not trying to show off," she replied. "I know." He nodded. "That's what makes it interesting. Most people with skills like that want everyone to know. You're the opposite." Lexi said nothing, but her fingers absently traced the outline of the butterfly on her arm. "You want to tell me where a logistics specialist learns to field strip an M4 blindfolded?" Marcus asked. "You want to tell me why you care?" she countered. Marcus chuckled. "Fair enough. Look, I'm not trying to pry into your business, but I've been around long enough to know when someone's story doesn't add up, and yours has more holes than a training target." For a long moment, Lexi was silent. Then so quietly he almost missed it, she said, "Everyone has a past, Sergeant. Some are just better left there. And some follow us no matter how far we run," he replied. Her eyes snapped to his, something like recognition flickering there. Then her walls came back up. "I should get some rest. Early shift tomorrow." As she stood to leave, Marcus noticed something he hadn't before. A small scar at the base of her neck, partially hidden by her collar. The kind of mark left by a knife held from behind. When she was gone, he sat alone, more certain than ever that Private First Class Alexis Morgan was carrying secrets far heavier than supply manifests. Lieutenant Wilson wasn't satisfied. Something about Morgan's performance with the M4 bothered him. It was too perfect, too practiced. He made his way to the administrative office, flashing his ID to the clerk on duty. "I need to see Private Morgan's personnel file," he demanded. The clerk frowned. "Sir, personnel files require authorization from—" "I'm conducting a fitness review of my entire logistics team," Wilson interrupted. "Standard procedure." Reluctantly, the clerk pulled the file. Wilson took it to a desk in the corner and began reading. Basic training at Fort Jackson. Logistics school at Fort Lee. Previous posting at Fort Drum. Exemplary efficiency ratings. No disciplinary actions. Everything in order. Two in order, Wilson thought. The file read like a template with none of the small notes or observations that usually accumulated in a soldier's record. It was perfect, sanitized. He flipped to the back where a small notation caught his eye. A medical exemption from a training exercise 3 years prior. Reason: prior injury classified. Wilson's eyes narrowed. Classified injuries didn't happen to supply clerks. He closed the file, his suspicion deepening. Who exactly was Alexis Morgan? The announcement came during morning formation. Captain Thomas, the company commander, stood before the assembled soldiers with an unusual energy. "Listen up, people. We're getting visitors next week. Navy SEAL Team 8 will be rotating through Camp Hawthorne for joint training exercises. This is a rare opportunity to work with some of the best operators in the business. I expect everyone to represent this company with professionalism and discipline." A buzz of excitement ran through the ranks. SEALs were legendary, their missions, the stuff of movies and war stories. For many of the younger soldiers, this would be their first encounter with Special Operations Forces. In the back row, Lexi Morgan went very still. Her face, always composed, now looked carved from stone. Marcus Daniels, standing nearby, noticed the change immediately. The slight widening of her eyes, the way her breathing became controlled, deliberate, the almost imperceptible step backwards she took. It wasn't excitement he saw in her expression. It was recognition. And beneath that, something that looked remarkably like fear. When formation broke, Lexi moved quickly, heading not toward her office, but toward the communications center. Marcus followed at a distance, watching as she entered the secure phone room. She emerged 15 minutes later, her face even more closed off than before. Throughout the day, her behavior shifted subtly. She reorganized her work schedule, volunteering for night shifts that would keep her away from the main areas of the base during daytime hours. She requested access to inventory areas that were rarely used. She changed her meal times to avoid the busiest periods. Someone who didn't know her routine might not have noticed. But Marcus had been watching Lexi Morgan for weeks now. She was preparing, adapting, like someone getting ready for a storm, or like someone trying to disappear. That evening, as sunset painted the desert in gold and shadow, Marcus approached Lexi's workstation. She was methodically organizing files, her movements precise, but her attention elsewhere. "You know them, don't you?" he asked without preamble. "The SEAL team that's coming." Lexi's hands stilled for just a moment before resuming their work. "I don't know what you're talking about, Sergeant." "I think you do." He leaned against her desk. "The moment Captain Thomas made that announcement, you looked like you'd seen a ghost. Or maybe like you were afraid of seeing one." "I was thinking about the extra work," she said evenly. "Joint exercises mean more logistics, more supply demands." Marcus shook his head. "You're good, Morgan, one of the best liars I've ever met, but your eyes give you away." For the first time since he'd known her, real anger flashed across her face. "With all due respect, Sergeant, my eyes are none of your concern, neither is my past." "It is when it affects this unit," he replied. "Whatever history you have with these SEALs, it's eating you alive. And that makes it my business." Lexi stood gathering her files. "I need to finish these inventories before tomorrow." As she moved to leave, Marcus said quietly, "You know, whatever you're running from, it has a way of catching up eventually." She paused at the door, her back to him. "That's what I'm afraid of," she whispered so softly he almost missed it. Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone with his growing certainty that Alexis Morgan was far more than a logistics specialist with a butterfly tattoo. Later that night, unable to sleep, Lexi sat on her bunk while the other women in the barracks dreamed around her. From beneath her mattress, she withdrew a small, worn notebook. Its pages were filled with coordinates, code names, and diagrams. In the dim light, she traced her fingers over the butterfly, drawing on the inside cover. A simple sketch done in ballpoint pen. Beneath it, in neat block letters, When the mission's over, remember who you were before. A. A single tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, angry at the moment of weakness. Then she flipped to a blank page and began to write. A letter like the dozens before it that would never be sent. Dear Alex, they're coming here. Your team. Your brothers. I don't know if I can face them after what happened. After what I cost them. After what I cost you. The butterfly was supposed to be a reminder of freedom. Of life after. But there is no after, is there? Not for me. Not for you. I keep thinking about that valley. About the choices I made. The information I missed. The warning that came too late. They laugh at my tattoo here. If they knew what it meant, what it cost, they wouldn't laugh. They'd turn away in horror. I'm not ready to face them. To see in their eyes what I already know. That it should have been me, not you. I miss you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Wabbit-it-it-el. She closed the notebook, tucking it carefully back into its hiding place. Then she lay down on her bunk, staring at the ceiling, knowing sleep wouldn't come tonight. Not with the ghost so close. 3 days later, the entire camp was buzzing with anticipation. The SEAL team would arrive tomorrow. Facilities were being prepared. Briefing rooms cleaned, extra supplies requisitioned. Lexi Morgan moved through it all like a ghost, efficiently handling her duties while keeping to the shadows. In the evening, she found herself alone in the supply warehouse, double-checking inventory lists for the 10th time. The repetitive task kept her mind occupied, kept the memories at bay. She didn't hear the footsteps until they were right behind her. Working late again, Morgan. She turned to find Lieutenant Wilson watching her with narrowed eyes. Just finishing up, sir, she replied. He stepped closer, invading her space. You've been acting strange since the announcement about the SEALs. Volunteering for night shifts, changing your routines. I go where I'm needed, sir. Wilson's smile didn't reach his eyes. You know what I think? I think you're hiding something. Your file has holes in it. Your skills don't match your MOS. And now you're doing everything possible to avoid our visitors. Lexi met his gaze steadily. Is there something specific you need, Lieutenant? Just answers. He circled her slowly. Who are you really, Private Morgan? Because I'm starting to think you're not who your file says you are. For a moment, real danger flashed in Lexi's eyes, something primal and lethal. Then it was gone, shuttered behind her mask of calm. I'm exactly who my file says I am, sir. A logistics specialist doing her job. Wilson leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. We'll see about that. When those SEALs arrive tomorrow, I'll be watching you very carefully. And if there's any connection there, any recognition, I'll know. And then we'll have a very different conversation. He straightened, adjusting his uniform. Carry on, Private. As he walked away, Lexi's hand tightened on her clipboard until her knuckles went white. For the first time since arriving at Camp Hawthorne, genuine fear coursed through her. Not of Wilson, but of what tomorrow would bring. The choices were closing in around her. Run and confirm the suspicions. Stay and face the past she'd been hiding from. Neither option offered safety. In her quarters that night, Lexi made her decision. She couldn't run anymore. Whatever came with the dawn, she would face it. She took out her notebook one last time, wrote a final entry, then tucked it away. If things went badly tomorrow, at least the truth would remain, even if she didn't. She sat on her bunk, staring at the butterfly on her arm. In the quiet darkness, she finally allowed herself to remember. The mission, the valley, the ambush, the choices that had saved lives and ended others, the price paid in blood and silence. Tomorrow, those ghosts would walk into Camp Hawthorne in flesh and blood, and Alexis Morgan would finally have to face what she had been running from for 3 long years. The convoy rolled into Camp Hawthorne just after dawn, tires grinding against the tarmac, heat already rising from the ground. A Navy SEAL detachment stepped out, disciplined, silent, carrying the weight of operations most would never know. At the front of them walked their commander, a man seasoned by decades of service. Lines etched his face, telling stories of deserts and mountains far from here, of decisions no one should have to make. Lexi Morgan stood off to the side, clipboard in hand sleeves rolled high as always. She was unnoticed, just another figure in tan fatigues. She wrote down tail numbers, checked manifests, and kept her head low. The commander's gaze swept the yard, sharp and searching, and then he froze, his eyes locked on Lexi's arm. The butterfly. He stopped walking. The operators behind him halted, 2 boots falling quiet on the blistering concrete. The commander stepped forward slowly, each movement deliberate, as though he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Lexi looked up, startled, but didn't move. Her fingers tightened around her clipboard. Then without a word, the SEAL commander straightened his shoulders and lifted his hand in a crisp salute. The air shifted instantly. Soldiers nearby froze in place, their trays, their tools, their words cut short. Silence spread across the yard like a wave. A whisper slipped through the ranks. Why is he saluting a clerk? No one dared laugh now. The commander's voice carried low but firm. You're still with us, Morgan. She gave the smallest nod. And just like that, everything changed. The salute hung in the air between them, a bridge across years of silence. Around them, Camp Hawthorne had fallen completely still. Soldiers froze mid-step, conversations died on lips, and all eyes fixed on the impossible scene unfolding before them. A Navy SEAL commander saluting a logistics clerk. Captain James Blackwood, leader of SEAL Team 8, held the salute longer than protocol demanded. His weathered face revealed nothing, but his eyes never left Lexi Morgan's. When he finally lowered his hand, the spell broke. Whispers erupted across the yard. At ease, Blackwood said, though Lexi hadn't moved to return the salute. Her fingers gripped her clipboard so tightly the plastic cracked. Sir. She managed, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Behind Blackwood, the other SEALs studied her with unreadable expressions. One of them, Lieutenant Noah Rivera, a younger operator with intelligent eyes and a scar bisecting his right eyebrow, tilted his head slightly. Recognition dawned on his face as his gaze locked on her tattoo. From across the yard, Lieutenant Wilson watched the exchange, his suspicions crystallizing into certainty. Whatever game Private Morgan was playing, it had just been exposed. He smiled thinly, already planning his next move. Blackwood gestured to the administrative building. We have a briefing scheduled. Will you be joining us, Private Morgan? The question carried weight beyond its simple words. Lexi knew what he was really asking. Are you ready to step back into that world? I'm assigned to logistics for this exercise, sir, she replied carefully. My duties keep me elsewhere. Disappointment flickered across Blackwood's face, quickly masked. I see. Perhaps another time. He nodded once more, then continued toward the building with his team. As they passed, Lieutenant Rivera's eyes lingered on Lexi's butterfly tattoo. His hand unconsciously touched his own forearm, where his sleeve covered what might have been a similar mark. When they were gone, the yard erupted in confused speculation. Soldiers who had mocked Lexi for months now stared at her with new uncertainty. Sergeant Hayes, who had been the first to grab her wrist and mock her tattoo, approached cautiously. Morgan, he began, uncharacteristically hesitant. You know those guys? Lexi slipped her professional mask back into place. I have inventory to complete, Sergeant. She turned and walked away, leaving Hayes and the others to their questions. Staff Sergeant Marcus Daniels had witnessed the entire exchange from the motor pool entrance. He watched Lexi retreat to the supply warehouse, her posture rigid with tension. Whatever connection existed between her and the SEALs, it had shaken her more than anything he'd seen at Camp Hawthorne. He waited an hour before seeking her out. He found her methodically counting boxes of ammunition, her movements precise but mechanical, her mind clearly elsewhere. So, he said, leaning against a shelf, you want to tell me what that was about? Lexi didn't look up. Not particularly. A SEAL commander doesn't salute a private first class without reason, Morgan. Her count faltered for just a moment. Maybe he mistook me for someone else. We both know that's not true. Marcus moved closer, lowering his voice. Look, I'm not here to pry secrets out of you. But Wilson saw that little exchange, and he's going to make trouble. Whatever you're hiding, it might not stay hidden much longer. Finally, she met his eyes. I can handle Wilson. I believe you can? Marcus nodded. But the question is whether you should have to. Whatever happened out there, whoever you were to those SEALs, maybe it's time to stop running from it. Lexi returned to her inventory. Some things can't be outrun, Sergeant, and some shouldn't be faced again. As Marcus left her alone with her boxes and her secrets, Lexi's mind drifted to places she had locked away for years. The weight of memory pressed down on her like the Arizona sun, inescapable and burning. That night, as darkness claimed the desert, Lexi lay on her bunk, sleep eluding her. The arrival of SEAL Team 8 had torn open wounds she'd thought carefully stitched shut. When she finally drifted off, her dreams carried her back to a place she had spent years trying to forget. The operations room hummed with equipment and tension. Satellite images showed a mountain valley in Afghanistan. Intelligence reports scattered across the table. Lexi, not in logistics fatigues but in the attire of an intelligence officer, stood before a team of SEALs briefing them on their mission. The compound is here. She pointed to a cluster of buildings. 3 structures likely reinforced. Intelligence suggests at least 15 hostiles heavily armed. The primary target is this building where we believe the high-value target is being held. Captain Blackwood, 3 years younger but with the same intensity, studied the images. Entry points. 2 confirmed, Lexi replied. North and east. Both will be guarded. There's a possible third access through the western wall, but satellite imagery is inconclusive. A younger SEAL with bright eyes leaned forward. Sounds like we need eyes on the ground before we commit. That's why you're going in first, Lieutenant Cameron, Blackwood said. You and Morgan will recon the approach. The rest of us follow once you confirm the western access. Lexi nodded, checking her equipment. Lieutenant Alex Cameron, the team's point man, grinned at her. Ready to be my butterfly again, Morgan. Float in, see everything float out. She rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her smile. Just try to keep up this time. The dream shifted. Night vision green tinted the world. Lexi and Cameron moved silently through rocky terrain approaching the compound. Their communication was wordless, the product of dozens of missions together. They reached an outcropping overlooking the western wall. I count 4 guards, Lexi whispered into her comm. 2 at the north entrance, 2 patrolling the perimeter. Confirmed, Cameron replied. Western access looks viable. There's a drainage pipe that... A flash of movement caught Lexi's attention. Wait, something's wrong. She adjusted her night vision scope, scanning the ridge line above the compound. There, on the high ground. Those aren't rocks. Cameron followed her gaze. Shit, secondary position. They're not in the intel brief. Blackwood, hold position, Lexi transmitted urgently. We have unexpected hostiles on the ridge, at least 6 more with heavy weapons. Static answered her. The comm link was dead. Jammed, Cameron whispered. They knew we were coming. Lexi's mind raced. We need to abort. The team is walking into an ambush. No time to go back. We have to warn them now. Cameron was already moving. I'll create a diversion. You get to the rendezvous point and signal the abort. Alex, don't. But he was already sliding down toward the compound, his decision made. Just be my butterfly, Lexi. See everything. Make the right call. The dream fractured into chaotic images, gunfire erupting across the valley. Lexi racing to reach the team. Blackwood's face as she finally found them, warning them seconds before they would have entered the kill zone. The desperate firefight as they extracted under heavy fire, and Lieutenant Alex Cameron bleeding out in her arms as the rescue helicopter lifted off. His last act had been to press something into her hand, a crude drawing on a scrap of paper, a butterfly. Remember who you were before, he whispered. Promise me. She had promised. But as his blood soaked into her uniform, she knew she could never be that person again. Lexi jolted awake, sweat-soaked and gasping. The barracks around her were quiet, her bunkmates still asleep. She pressed her palms against her eyes, willing the images away. It had been months since the nightmares had been this vivid. She slipped silently from her bunk and dressed in the dark. Sleep wouldn't return tonight. Instead, she made her way to the gym deserted at 100 hours. The heavy bag welcomed her like an old friend. Each punch drove back the memories, each kick pushed away the guilt. She lost herself in the rhythm of violence, controlled and purposeful. She didn't notice she had an audience until she paused to catch her breath. Lieutenant Noah Rivera leaned against the doorway, watching her with analytical eyes. Your form is excellent, he said, not something they teach in logistics school. Lexi grabbed a towel, wiping sweat from her face. You're up early, Lieutenant. Same as you. Bad dreams. He stepped into the gym. Funny thing about nightmares, they tend to find us when the past comes knocking. Is there something you need, sir? Lexi asked, already moving toward the exit. Rivera blocked her path, not aggressively but deliberately. I need to understand something, Morgan. 3 years ago, after the valley, you disappeared. No goodbye, no explanation. Just gone. Blackwood pulled strings to keep your name out of the official reports. Said you'd earned your privacy, your peace. His fingers unconsciously traced his forearm, where Lexi now knew a butterfly tattoo identical to hers lay hidden beneath his sleeve. But here you are, he continued, hiding in plain sight, pretending to be someone you're not. Why? Lexi met his gaze steadily. I'm exactly who I need to be, Lieutenant. Alex wouldn't want this for you, Rivera's voice softened. He didn't sacrifice himself so you could bury yourself alive. The mention of Cameron's name hit Lexi like a physical blow. You don't know what he would want, she said, her voice barely controlled. You don't know what happened that night. Then tell me, Rivera urged. Tell me why one of the best intelligence officers I ever worked with is counting ammunition boxes in the desert instead of using her skills where they matter. They mattered that night, Lexi said bitterly, and 6 men still died, including him. Rivera's expression hardened. We're deploying again next month. Afghanistan, same region. Blackwood requested you specifically for the intelligence briefing, but the request was denied. Now I understand why you've been hiding here all along. He stepped aside, clearing her path to the door. Whatever you're punishing yourself for, Morgan, it won't bring Alex back, and it won't honor what he died for. Lexi walked past him without another word, but Rivera called after her. We all carry the butterfly, Morgan. It means we survived. It means we remember. It doesn't mean we stopped living. She didn't turn back, but his words followed her into the dawn, echoing alongside the ghost she couldn't escape. Word of the strange encounter between Private Morgan and the SEAL commander spread through Camp Hawthorne like wildfire. Soldiers who had once mocked her now watched her with cautious curiosity. Some even offered hesitant nods of acknowledgement when she passed. The butterfly tattoo, once a source of ridicule, became the subject of intense speculation. Private Taylor Rodriguez found Lexi in the mess hall that afternoon, sliding into the seat across from her with determined friendliness. So, Taylor said without preamble, the whole camp's talking about you and the SEALs. Care to share the real story before the rumors get completely out of hand? Lexi sipped her water. People will talk. Let them. They're saying you were some kind of secret operator, that you saved that SEAL commander's life, that the butterfly is some kind of special forces code. People have vivid imaginations. Taylor leaned closer. Look, Morgan, I get the whole mysterious lone wolf thing, but this is different. Lieutenant Wilson is asking questions about you. Officially. Maybe it's time to trust someone around here. Lexi's eyes sharpened. What kind of questions? He's pulling your service records, checking your background. He even asked me if you'd ever mentioned previous deployments. Taylor frowned. He seems convinced you're not who you say you are. And what did you tell him? That you barely talk about the weather, let alone your past. Taylor studied her. But now I'm wondering if he might be right. Lexi stood collecting her tray. Thanks for the warning, Rodriguez. That's it. That's all you have to say. Lexi paused. What would you do, Taylor, if the person you were supposed to be and the person you actually are couldn't exist in the same place at the same time? Before Taylor could answer, Lexi walked away, leaving her bunkmate staring after her in confusion. Lieutenant Wilson sat in Captain Thomas's office, a folder open on the desk between them. His expression was triumphant. It doesn't add up, sir, Wilson insisted. Morgan's service record shows no special training, no deployments outside standard logistics rotations, yet a SEAL commander salutes her on sight. There's clearly classified history there. Captain Thomas looked uncomfortable. Lieutenant fishing expeditions into soldiers' backgrounds is not how we operate. If Morgan has classified history, it's classified for a reason. With respect, sir, having unknown operators embedded in our unit poses security questions, especially with joint exercises beginning tomorrow. Thomas sighed. What exactly are you suggesting, Wilson? Let me put her to the test. The joint exercise includes a combat simulation. Put Morgan in it. If she's really just a logistics clerk, she'll perform like one. But if she's something else? You want to publicly embarrass one of my soldiers on a hunch? Thomas frowned. I want to confirm or deny a security concern, Wilson countered. Besides, all soldiers should maintain basic combat readiness, even logistics personnel. It's a reasonable training evolution. Thomas considered for a long moment. Fine, add her to tomorrow's roster. But Wilson, this stays professional. I won't have witch hunts in my command. Of course, sir. Purely professional. Wilson smiled as he left the office, already imagining how he would expose Morgan's deception. That evening, Alexi was summoned to the command center. Inside, she found Captain Thomas and Lieutenant Wilson waiting. Her stomach tightened at Wilson's barely concealed smugness. Private Morgan, Thomas began. You've been added to tomorrow's joint exercise roster. Squad 2 with Sergeant Hayes. Lexi kept her expression neutral. Sir, I'm scheduled for inventory during that block. Reassign, Wilson interjected. All personnel should maintain combat readiness, even logistics. The emphasis on the last word made Thomas glance sharply at his lieutenant. Lexi understood immediately what was happening. This was Wilson's move to force her hand to make her reveal herself. Of course, sir, she replied evenly. What role will I be playing? Forward observer, Wilson answered. You'll be paired with one of the SEALs. Lieutenant Rivera specifically requested you. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Place her in a combat scenario with someone who knew her true capabilities. Either she performed poorly and undermined the exercise, or she performed at her real skill level and exposed her deception. Understood, sir. 0700 tomorrow. As she turned to leave, Wilson added, "Oh, and Morgan full combat load. Let's see what you can really do." Walking back to her barracks, Lexi felt the walls closing in. Her carefully constructed sanctuary at Camp Hawthorne was crumbling. Soon she would have to choose continue the lie and compromise the mission, or reveal the truth and face the consequences. She found Marcus Daniels waiting outside her barracks, concern etched on his face. "I heard about tomorrow," he said without preamble. "Wilson's gunning for you, and I know." Lexi glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "It was inevitable, I suppose." "What are you going to do?" She smiled thinly. "What soldiers always do, Sergeant. Adapt and overcome." Marcus studied her. "Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever you decide to show them, I've got your back." The simple declaration caught her off guard. It had been so long since anyone had stood beside her, had offered support without demanding explanations. For a moment, her mask slipped, revealing genuine gratitude. "Thank you, Marcus. That means more than you know." As darkness settled over the desert, two very different preparations were underway. In her barracks, Lexi Morgan methodically checked gear she hadn't touched in years of muscle memory, guiding her hands through once familiar routines. And in the officers' quarters, Lieutenant Noah Rivera unfolded a worn photograph showing a team of operators in the mountains of Afghanistan. At the edge of the group stood a younger Lexi Morgan in intelligence officer's attire, her arm around Lieutenant Alex Cameron. Both wore easy smiles that spoke of trust and something more. Rivera traced the image with his finger, remembering. Then he carefully refolded the photo and tucked it away. Tomorrow would bring its own reckonings. Dawn broke over Camp Hawthorne in shades of amber and gold. The joint exercise would take place in a training area 10 miles from the main base, a stretch of desert and rocky outcroppings that mimicked the terrain of Afghanistan. 4 squads would participate, each paired with SEAL operators, in a complex scenario involving reconnaissance, simulated hostile contact, and extraction. Lexi arrived at the staging area to find her squad already assembled. Sergeant Hayes nodded stiffly, still uncomfortable after witnessing the SEAL commander's salute. The other soldiers watched her with barely concealed curiosity. "Morgan," Hayes began awkwardly, "we're positioned as forward observers. You'll be paired with Lieutenant Rivera from the SEAL detachment. Basic recon only." She nodded, accepting the radio and map he offered. Her uniform was standard issue, but she had made subtle adjustments only a trained eye would notice. The way her gear was arranged for silent movement. The positioning of her canteen and medical kit for efficient access. Small tells that anyone with special operations experience would recognize immediately. Lieutenant Rivera approached his own gear minimal and precisely arranged. His eyes took in her preparations with professional assessment. "Ready, Private Morgan?" He asked, his tone neutral, but his eyes conveying deeper meaning. "Yes, sir," she replied, just a logistics clerk doing her best. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "We'll see." The exercise began with a briefing from Captain Blackwood. The scenario intelligence suggested hostile forces were using a network of caves to store weapons. 4 squads would approach from different vectors, gather intelligence, and report back without engaging unless necessary. Success depended on stealth and accurate observation. As the teams dispersed, Lexi and Rivera headed toward the northern approach, a rocky ridgeline that offered optimal observation of the target area. They moved in silence, at first finding their rhythm. Despite years away from fieldcraft, Lexi's body remembered. Her footsteps fell silently, her weight distributed perfectly over unstable terrain, her awareness constantly scanning their surroundings. After 20 minutes, Rivera paused in the shadow of a large boulder. "Your muscle memory is still strong," he observed. "Some things never leave you." Lexi checked their position on the map. "We should keep moving. The observation point is another click north." "You know, Black would never believe the official story," Rivera continued as if she hadn't spoken. "About what happened in the valley that night, about why you disappeared afterward." She stiffened. "This isn't the time, Lieutenant." "When is the time, Morgan? You've been hiding for 3 years." "I haven't been hiding," she countered. "I've been serving in a different capacity." Rivera laughed softly. "Counting bullets instead of firing them. Creating supply manifests instead of intelligence assessments. That's not service, that's penance." Before she could respond, their radio crackled. "All units be advised, change in exercise parameters. OP4 has been authorized for dynamic engagement. Repeat, live opposition force, now active in the training area." Rivera frowned. "That wasn't in the brief." A cold certainty settled in Lexi's stomach. Wilson, she said, he's changing the parameters to force my hand. What do you mean? He's suspicious about my background, about why Blackwood saluted me. He's creating a combat scenario to see how I react. Rivera considered this. Then give him what he wants. Show him who Alexis Morgan really is. She shook her head. I can't. Those records are sealed for a reason. What I did in Afghanistan, it never goes in the books. Then don't show him everything, Rivera suggested. Just enough to get him off your back. Blackwood can handle the fallout. Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of simulated gunfire. The exercise was heating up faster than planned. Lexi made her decision. Let's get to the observation point. We'll assess from there. They moved with increased urgency, scaling the ridgeline with practiced efficiency. At the top, they found a natural depression offering both cover and a clear view of the valley below. Lexi retrieved binoculars from her pack, scanning the terrain with methodical precision. 3 up 4 teams, she reported. Classic pincer movement. They're pushing Squad 4 toward that box canyon. Rivera used his own optics to confirm. Hayes and Squad 2 are about to walk right into their flank. No way they see it coming from their angle. Lexi was already on the radio. Hayes, this is Morgan. Be advised, up 4 elements at your 2 o'clock using terrain for concealment. Suggest immediate course correction bearing 180. There was a pause, then Hayes responded, confusion evident in his voice. How can you possibly see that from your position, Morgan? Trust me, Sergeant. Change course now or your squad is getting ambushed in about 3 minutes. Perhaps it was the authority in her voice so different from her usual quiet deference, but Hayes gave the order to redirect. Minutes later, his squad avoided the ambush that would have eliminated them from the exercise. Rivera smiled. Not bad for a logistics clerk. Lexi ignored him, continuing her methodical scan of the battlefield. The primary objective is vulnerable. Northern approach, minimal opposition. If we move now, we can reach it before up 4 reinforces. That's beyond our assigned role, Rivera pointed out. She met his eyes. When has that ever stopped us? Something passed between them, a shared memory of other missions. Other times when plans changed and adaptation meant survival. Rivera nodded once. Lead on, Morgan. They descended the ridge line using a route invisible from the valley floor, moving with the synchronized precision of operators who had worked together before. They encountered 2 OPFOR soldiers whom they neutralized with quick, efficient movements before the opposition could radio their position. As they approached the cave system designated as the primary objective, Lexi held up her hands, signaling a halt. She closed her eyes, listening beyond the sounds of the exercise. Something's wrong, she whispered. The wind's shifted. You smell that? Rivera inhaled deeply. Gasoline. A real sense of alarm replaced the training mindset. Lexi moved forward cautiously, peering around a boulder toward the cave entrance. What she saw made her blood run cold. 3 figures in civilian clothes, not part of the exercise, were arranging containers near the cave entrance. Rivera, she breathed. We've got a real-world situation, civilians with incendiaries. He joined her, taking in the scene with professional calm. Locals, maybe teenagers messing around. No, Lexi said grimly. Look at their movement patterns. Those aren't kids. As they watched, one of the men checked his watch, said something to his companions, and began retreating from the area. The implications were clear. They were setting up some kind of timed incendiary device. We need to alert command, get the exercise scrubbed, Rivera said, reaching for his radio. Lexi caught his wrist. No time. Those caves connect to the main training area. If that goes up with all our people scattered across the field, understanding dawned in Rivera's eyes. What's the play? The question was simple, but its significance profound. In that moment, he wasn't asking a logistics clerk for input. He was deferring to the intelligence officer he trusted in combat. We intervene, Lexi decided. Non-lethal if possible. You take the 2 by the entrance. I'll pursue the one who's leaving. He's likely the leader. Rivera nodded, all pretense gone. Just like old times. God, I hope not, Lexi murmured, but there was the ghost of a smile on her lips. They moved with practiced coordination, using the terrain for cover, until they were in optimal position. Rivera gave the signal, and they sprang into action. He intercepted the 2 figures by the cave, his SEAL training evident in the controlled efficiency of his takedown. Neither man had a chance to react before they were subdued. Lexi pursued the 3rd figure, who had nearly reached a vehicle concealed behind a rocky outcropping. Her footsteps were silent, her approach invisible until she was almost upon him. The man sensed her too late, turning just as she closed the distance. He reached for a weapon, but Lexi was faster. Years of training of operations and shadows returned in an instant. Her movements were precise, economical, devastating. In seconds, the man was incapacitated, his weapon secured, his hands zip-tied behind his back. Only then did she register the shocked faces watching from nearby. Lieutenant Wilson, Captain Thomas, and two other officers stood frozen at the edge of the training area, having come to observe the exercise. They had instead witnessed Private Morgan, supposed logistics clerk, take down an armed hostile with the skill of a seasoned operator. The truth so carefully hidden was now exposed in the harsh desert sun. Captain Blackwood arrived minutes later with security forces taking control of the three civilians who were revealed to be local extremists planning to sabotage the military exercise. As the situation was secured, Lexi found herself separated from the others, sitting alone in a command vehicle while senior officers conferred nearby. The bubble of isolation burst when Captain Thomas entered, his expression unreadable. He sat across from her, silent for a long moment. 3 years ago, he finally said, "I received transfer papers for a logistics specialist with exemplary scores, but no combat experience. The paperwork was perfect, too perfect. I had questions, but they were met with closed doors and recommendations to accept the assignment without further inquiry." Lexi remained silent, her gaze steady. "I knew you were different," Thomas continued, "but I respected whatever circumstances brought you to my command. Until today, I believed that respect was appropriate." He leaned forward. "Who are you really, Morgan?" Before she could answer, the door opened and Captain Blackwood entered, followed by Lieutenant Rivera. Blackwood nodded to Thomas. "Captain, I need a moment with Morgan." Thomas hesitated, then stood. "This isn't over," he said to Lexi before departing. When they were alone, Blackwood took the seat across from her. "Well," he said simply, "the butterfly has emerged from her chrysalis." Lexi almost smiled at the metaphor. "Not by choice, sir. Few transformations are." Blackwood placed a folder on the table between them. "Your actions today likely saved lives. Those men had enough accelerant to create a significant event, possibly with casualties. I was just in the right place." "You were where you were needed," Blackwood corrected, "as you've always been." Rivera spoke for the first time. "The question is, where will you be tomorrow?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. After today, there was no returning to the anonymity of the supply warehouse. Her cover maintained for 3 years had been irreparably broken. "I don't know," Lexi admitted. Blackwood opened the folder, revealing official documents. "I have 2 options for you. First, transfer to another base, new identity, deeper cover. You disappear again. And the second, you come back to where you belong, Intelligence Division attached to Special Operations. Your old role, your real skills." Blackwood's voice softened. "Alex would want you to stop running, Lexi." The mention of Cameron's name still hurt, but differently now. Less raw, more like the ache of a healing wound. "I failed him," she said quietly. "I missed the signs, the ambush." "We all missed it," Rivera interjected. "The intelligence was flawed from higher up. You were the one who spotted the secondary position in time to warn the main element. Without you, we'd all have died in that valley." Blackwood nodded. "Cameron made his choice that night, a soldier's choice to protect his team. Honoring that choice means using your gifts, not burying them." Lexi looked down at her butterfly tattoo, tracing its outline with her finger. The hidden coordinates, the embedded numbers that marked the valley where everything had changed. For 3 years, it had been a memorial, a mark of guilt. Perhaps it could become something else. A symbol of transformation, as Cameron had intended. "I need time to think," she said finally. Blackwood stood. "Take the night. We deploy in 3 days. I have a seat reserved either way." He moved to the door, then paused. The butterfly was never meant to be a cage, Morgan. Remember that. As darkness fell over Camp Hawthorne, Lexi sat alone outside her barracks, watching stars emerge in the desert sky. The events of the day had stripped away her carefully constructed persona, leaving her exposed but somehow lighter. For the first time in years, she could breathe without the weight of deception. Footsteps approached, and she looked up to find Marcus Daniels standing nearby. "Quite a day," he said, settling beside her. "The whole camp's talking about how you saved the exercise from real-world hostiles." "People love a good story," she replied. "Is it true? Were you really some kind of special intelligence operative?" Lexi considered her answer carefully. "I was someone else once, someone who made difficult choices in dangerous places." Marcus nodded, accepting the partial truth. "And now, who are you now?" It was the question at the heart of everything, the one she'd been avoiding for 3 years. Who was Alexis Morgan when she wasn't hiding? when she wasn't punishing herself for Alex Cameron's death. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I think it's time to find out." In the distance, the lights of the command center glowed against the night sky. Somewhere in that building, a folder waited with her future inside it. By morning, she would need to make her choice, continue running from her past or embrace it and move forward. The butterfly tattoo on her arm seemed to pulse with its own life as she made her decision. It was time to emerge from the chrysalis, whatever form that might take. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for tonight, under the vast desert sky, Alexis Morgan allowed herself to remember who she had been before the valley, before the loss. And for the first time in 3 years, she wondered who she might become next. Morning arrived at Camp Hawthorne with the harsh brilliance only the desert could deliver. The sun climbed over the eastern mountains, painting the landscape in gold and amber, unaware and uncaring of the human dramas unfolding beneath its gaze. For Private First Class Alexis Morgan, this sunrise marked more than just another day. It marked a decision point, a line between past and future that could no longer be straddled. She had been awake for hours, seated on her bunk, while others slept around her. In her hands, she held two objects, her worn notebook with its private confessions and the butterfly drawing Alex Cameron had given her before that fateful night in the valley. As first light crept through the narrow windows, she made her choice. By the time reveille sounded, Lexi Morgan had already begun the transformation that had been 3 years in coming. The camp buzzed with activity and rumors. Word of yesterday's events had spread like wildfire. The quiet logistics clerk who had taken down an armed hostile with the precision of a special operator. The mysterious connection to the SEAL team, the butterfly tattoo that now seemed less like an oddity and more like a badge of honor. Soldiers who had once mocked her now watched her with a mixture of curiosity, respect, and wariness. Captain Thomas had called for a special briefing at Duro 800. All personnel involved in yesterday's exercise were to attend along with the SEAL detachment and senior officers. As Lexi made her way to the command center, she felt the weight of stairs following her. She wore her standard uniform, but somehow it fit differently today. Her posture had changed, her walk transformed from the deliberately unobtrusive gait of a logistics clerk to the confident stride of someone comfortable in her own skin. Staff Sergeant Marcus Daniels fell into step beside her. "You ready for this?" Lexi nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Whatever happens in there," Marcus said quietly, "a lot of people have your back now, not just the SEALs." The simple statement touched something in Lexi that had been dormant for years. The sense of belonging to a unit, of having people who stood with you regardless of circumstance. She had deprived herself of that connection for so long, convinced it was part of her penance. "Thank you, Marcus," she said, meaning it more than he could know. The briefing room was already crowded when they arrived. Captain Thomas stood at the front with Lieutenant Wilson beside him, their expressions a study in contrast. Thomas looked solemn but resolute, while Wilson radiated barely contained satisfaction. He thought today would vindicate his suspicions, expose Lexi as a fraud or security risk. Captain Blackwood and his SEAL team occupied one side of the room, their collective presence commanding attention despite their relaxed postures. Lexi took a seat near the back, aware of the eyes that tracked her movement. Private Taylor Rodriguez slid into the chair beside her, offering a small nod of solidarity. Whatever came next, Lexi would not face it alone. Captain Thomas called the room to attention. "As you are all aware, yesterday's training exercise was interrupted by a real-world security situation. Thanks to the actions of certain personnel, a potentially catastrophic incident was averted. 3 civilians with extremist connections were apprehended while attempting to plant incendiary devices in the training area." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "This incident has raised questions about our security protocols, which will be addressed in the coming days. It has also," his eyes found Lexi, "brought to light certain matters regarding personnel assignments and classifications." Lieutenant Wilson stepped forward, unable to contain himself. "Sir, if I may, given the circumstances, I believe we should address the status of Private Morgan immediately. Her actions yesterday clearly demonstrate capabilities inconsistent with her assigned role and reported background." A murmur ran through the assembled soldiers. Captain Thomas frowned at the interruption but nodded. "Yes, Lieutenant, that brings us to the next item." He gestured to Captain Blackwood, who rose and moved to the front of the room. Blackwood's weathered face revealed nothing as he surveyed the group. His eyes lingered briefly on Lexi before addressing the room at large. 3 years ago, he began, his deep voice carrying easily. "SEAL Team 8 conducted a classified operation in the Korangal Valley of Afghanistan. The mission parameters and outcomes remain classified, but certain facts have become relevant to the current situation. He nodded to Lieutenant Rivera, who activated a projector. On the screen appeared a photograph carefully edited to obscure sensitive details while leaving faces visible. It showed a team of operators and support personnel, and there standing among them was a younger Alexis Morgan in intelligence officer's attire. Intelligence officer Alexis Morgan served as embedded analyst with special operations teams for 4 years, Blackwood continued. Her contributions to numerous missions were instrumental to their success and to the survival of the operators under my command. The room had gone completely still. All eyes moved between the photograph and Lexi, who sat straight-backed and composed despite being the center of attention. Following the Korengal operation, Officer Morgan was reassigned under classified circumstances. Her subsequent placement in conventional forces was approved at the highest levels with appropriate security protocols. Blackwood's gaze found Lieutenant Wilson. Protocols that included protection from unwarranted scrutiny. Wilson's satisfaction curdled visibly into dismay. Sir, I was simply conducting due diligence given your personal dislike of Private Morgan and your need to assert authority, Blackwood interrupted coolly. Your due diligence nearly compromised a protected asset and could have had serious repercussions for national security. Captain Thomas stepped forward, reclaiming the control of the briefing. The point, Lieutenant, is that Private Morgan's assignment to this unit was neither accidental nor suspicious. It was a sanctioned placement that you had no authority to investigate. For the first time since Lexi had known him, Lieutenant Wilson appeared genuinely chastened. His face flushed with embarrassment as he realized how thoroughly he had overstepped and how completely he had misread the situation. Now, Thomas continued, yesterday's events have necessitated a reevaluation of current assignments. Given the compromise of Private Morgan's status, maintaining her current cover is no longer viable. He turned to face Lexi directly. Private Morgan, please stand. Lexi rose, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. For 3 years, she had worked to be invisible, to fade into the background. Now she stood in the spotlight, her carefully constructed anonymity stripped away. In light of recent developments and after consultation with higher authorities, I am authorizing your immediate reassignment, Thomas announced. Effective immediately, you are relieved of logistics duties and will report to Captain Blackwood for temporary attachment to SEAL Team 8 as intelligence support. The statement sent a ripple of surprised murmurs through the room. It was unprecedented for a conventional forces soldier, let alone a junior enlisted member, to be assigned directly to a SEAL team. This assignment is provisional pending your decision regarding permanent transfer back to intelligence services. Thomas added, his tone softening slightly. The paperwork will reflect appropriate rank adjustments and security clearance reinstatement. Lexi stood perfectly still, absorbing the words that officially ended her self-imposed exile. When she spoke, her voice carried a quiet authority that few in the room had heard before. Thank you, sir. I accept the assignment. As she retook her seat, the atmosphere in the room had transformed. The soldiers who had once dismissed her as just a clerk now regarded her with new understanding and, in many cases, newfound respect. The butterfly tattoo visible on her forearm was no longer an object of ridicule, but a symbol of something profound that they were only beginning to grasp. Captain Thomas concluded the briefing with details about increased security measures and the ongoing investigation into the extremist group. As the assembly dispersed, Lexi found herself approached by Sergeant Hayes, the same man who had once grabbed her wrist and mocked her tattoo in front of the entire formation. Hayes cleared his throat awkwardly. Morgan, he struggled to find the right words. I guess we owe you an apology. Lexi studied him, seeing not the bully of recent months, but a soldier confronting his own failings. We all have roles to play, Sergeant. Mine was to be overlooked. You helped make that possible. Hayes blinked, unsure if she was offering absolution or delivering the most elegant reprimand of his career. Before he could decide, Lexi continued, but the mission parameters have changed now, so perhaps we all get a fresh start. She offered her hand. After a moment's hesitation, Hayes shook it firmly. For what it's worth, Morgan, I'm glad you were here yesterday. My squad would have walked right into that ambush if not for your warning. With a final nod, he moved away, leaving Lexi to face the next in what seemed an endless line of people seeking to speak with her. Private Taylor Rodriguez approached her expression a mixture of awe and betrayal. An intelligence officer, she said, shaking her head. All this time, I've been trying to get you to join movie night, and you've been what, some kind of spy? Despite everything, Lexi found herself smiling. Not a spy, Taylor, just an analyst who ended up in the field more often than planned. And the fighting skills, the blind weapons assembly, the mysterious letters you write but never send. Some habits are hard to break, Lexi admitted. As for the letters, her smile faded. Those were for Alex, Lieutenant Cameron. He didn't make it back from the valley. Understanding dawned in Taylor's eyes. The butterfly drawing in your locker. It was from him. Lexi nodded, surprised that Taylor had noticed such a detail. He drew it the night before the mission. Said I reminded him of a butterfly light on my feet, always aware of my surroundings, capable of transformation. Her fingers unconsciously traced the tattoo. After he died, all the survivors got the same tattoo, a way to remember. Taylor was quiet for a moment, absorbing this glimpse into a world so different from her own. Will you still be around, or are you disappearing with the SEALs? I'll be here until they deploy. After that, Lexi shrugged. I haven't decided yet. Well, Taylor said with determined cheerfulness, until then my movie night invitation still stands. Maybe now you'll actually say yes. Before Lexi could respond, Captain Blackwood approached, nodding respectfully to Taylor before addressing Lexi. When you're finished here, we need to talk. My office 20 minutes. As he walked away, Taylor raised an eyebrow. Your new boss seems intense. You have no idea, Lexi replied, but there was warmth in her voice that had been absent for years. Captain Blackwood's temporary office was Spartan, containing only a desk, 2 chairs, and a secure communications setup. When Lexi entered, she found not only Blackwood, but also Lieutenant Rivera waiting for her. The door closed behind her with a solid click. Have a seat, Morgan. Blackwood indicated the empty chair. Or should I say Lieutenant Morgan now? The paperwork will take time to process, Lexi replied, sitting with the straight-backed posture of an officer rather than the deliberate slouch she had cultivated as a private. But yes, the reinstatement includes my commission. Rivera leaned forward. How does it feel coming back in from the cold? Lexi considered the question. Surreal. For 3 years I've been someone else. Someone smaller, quieter. It's strange to reclaim my own skin. You never should have lost it, Blackwood said, his tone carrying a hint of old arguments. The decision to bury you in logistics was political, not tactical. You were too valuable to waste. It wasn't a waste, Lexi countered. It was what I needed. After the valley, after Alex, I couldn't trust my own judgment. I couldn't bear the weight of making decisions that cost lives. So you chose to make no decisions at all, Rivera observed. Lexi's eyes flashed. I chose to step back until I could see clearly again. There's a difference. Blackwood nodded, accepting her perspective without necessarily agreeing. And now, how's your vision these days, Lieutenant? The question was loaded with meaning beyond its simple words. He wasn't asking about her eyesight, but about her ability to see patterns, to analyze threats, to make the split-second judgments that intelligence work required, and that had once been her specialty. Clearer than it's been in a long time, she admitted. Yesterday, spotting those hostiles, it was like muscle memory. Everything just clicked back into place. Good, Blackwood said with satisfaction, because we need you back at full capacity. The mission we're preparing for is significant, possibly connected to the same network we encountered in Korengal. Lexi stiffened. The same people who were waiting for us, who knew we were coming. Rivera nodded grimly. Intelligence suggests they've regrouped under new leadership, still operating in the same region, still with the same concerning connections to elements within the Afghan government, which means the same leak might still exist. Lexi concluded, her analytical mind already racing ahead. The same person who compromised our operation 3 years ago could compromise this one. Exactly, Blackwood confirmed. That's why we need you. You know the case better than anyone. You've been following the threads longer than anyone. And frankly, you have personal motivation to see it through. Lexi was silent for a long moment, memories of that night in the valley washing over her. The desperate firefight, the frantic evacuation. Alex Cameron bleeding out in her arms, his last act drawing the butterfly that would become their shared memorial. What's the timeline? She finally asked. 3 days until we deploy. 2 weeks of in-theater preparation, then the operation itself. Blackwood slid a folder across the desk. Everything we have so far is in there. Your security clearance has been reactivated, effective immediately. Lexi opened the folder, scanning the first page of intelligence assessments. Names and locations jumped out at her, some familiar, others new. Her mind began automatically sorting, categorizing, connecting disparate pieces of information into a coherent whole. It was like slipping back into a familiar language after years of forced silence. I'll need access to the complete intelligence archives, she said, already making mental notes. and direct communication with our assets in country. Blackwood smiled, satisfaction evident in his weathered features. Welcome back, Lieutenant Morgan. For the next several hours, Lexi immersed herself in intelligence reports, satellite imagery, and signal intercepts. The temporary office they'd given her in the secure section of the command center quickly transformed its walls covered with maps and photos, its desk buried under folders and notebooks. She worked with a focused intensity that felt both foreign and deeply familiar, like rediscovering a part of herself long dormant. Staff Sergeant Marcus Daniels found her there as evening approached, knocking lightly on the open door. They said I'd find you here, quite a change from the supply warehouse. Lexi looked up, momentarily disoriented as she shifted mental gears. Marcus, come in. He entered, taking in the organized chaos of her workspace. So this is what you really do, intelligence analysis. Among other things, she acknowledged. I knew you were hiding something, he said, settling into a chair across from her. But this is beyond what I imagined. Lexi set down her pen. I'm sorry for the deception. It wasn't personal. I know that now. Marcus studied her with new understanding. The skills, the awareness, the way you always scanned rooms. It all makes sense. You weren't just a clerk playing soldier. You were a soldier playing clerk. A necessary fiction, Lexi said quietly. One that served its purpose. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. The real question is, who are you now, the clerk or the intelligence officer? Or something in between? It was a profound question, one that cut to the heart of her journey. For 3 years, Lexi Morgan had lived a divided existence, her true self locked away, a constructed persona presented to the world. The lines between them had blurred over time, each leaving its mark on the other. I'm still figuring that out, she admitted. But I think I'm ready to be whole again. To stop compartmentalizing my life into before and after. Because of the mission, because it's time, Lexi said simply. Alex used to say that a butterfly doesn't forget being a caterpillar, but it doesn't let that memory keep it from flying either. Marcus smiled. Sounds like a wise man. He was. Lexi traced the outline of her tattoo absently. And he would be the first to tell me that 3 years of mourning is enough, that life is for the living. Smart guy, Marcus agreed. He hesitated, then added, the SEALs deploy soon, I hear. Will you be going with them? The question hung in the air between them, carrying implications beyond the professional. In the weeks they had known each other, Marcus Daniels had become something rare in Lexi's life, a genuine friend, someone who had seen value in her, even when she was hiding her true self. Yes, she confirmed. My reassignment is effective immediately. When they go, I go. Marcus nodded, disappointment flashing briefly in his eyes before being replaced with understanding. It's where you belong. It's where I'm needed, Lexi corrected gently. Where I belong, that's still an open question. Their conversation was interrupted by Lieutenant Rivera appearing in the doorway. Morgan, we need you in the command center. New intelligence just came in. Lexi rose immediately, her demeanor shifting to professional focus. I'll be right there. As Rivera departed, she turned back to Marcus. Duty calls. He stood as well. Go be who you really are, Lexi. It suits you better than hiding ever did. With a grateful smile, she squeezed his arm, once then hurried after Rivera, already mentally shifting back into operational mode. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation, briefings, and intelligence analysis. Lexi worked closely with the SEAL team, reintegrating into their operational rhythm with surprising ease. Her insights proved invaluable as they prepared for the upcoming mission, her intimate knowledge of the target region and personnel filling gaps in their intelligence picture. Throughout Camp Hawthorne, the story of Private Morgan's transformation had taken on near mythical proportions. Rumors circulated about her past exploits, each more elaborate than the last. Some claimed she had been a deep cover operative behind enemy lines. Others whispered about classified rescue missions in impossible odds. The truth, as always, was both simpler and more complex than the stories. Lexi paid little attention to the rumors. Her focus remained on the mission ahead and the threat it represented. The same network that had ambushed them in the Korengal Valley 3 years ago had evolved, becoming more sophisticated and more dangerous. If their operation succeeded, it would dismantle a significant threat to coalition forces. If it failed, more lives would be lost, more blood spilled in those distant mountains. On the evening before deployment, Captain Thomas requested her presence in his office. When she arrived, she found him alone, reviewing paperwork with a troubled expression. Lieutenant Morgan, he acknowledged, still adjusting to her restored rank. Please sit down. Lexi complied, noting the formal atmosphere. Is there a problem, sir? Thomas sighed, setting aside his papers. Not a problem precisely, more of a loose end. He fixed her with a direct gaze. Lieutenant Wilson has submitted a formal apology for his conduct regarding your assignment. He's also requested a transfer effective immediately. This was unexpected. Wilson had avoided her entirely since the revelation of her true status, his humiliation complete in public. That's his prerogative, sir. Yes, but before approving it, I wanted your input. Thomas leaned forward. His actions were inappropriate and potentially dangerous, but they were also motivated by genuine concern for unit security, however misplaced. Lexi considered her response carefully. 3 days ago, she might have welcomed Wilson's departure with private satisfaction, but something had shifted within her, a perspective gained, or perhaps regained. Lieutenant Wilson made assumptions based on incomplete information, she said finally. That's something I understand all too well. It's the same mistake I made 3 years ago, the one that cost lives in that valley. She met Thomas's eyes steadily. If he's willing to learn from the experience rather than just run from it, I believe he could still be an asset to this command. Thomas studied her with new respect. Forgiveness isn't something I expected from you given the circumstances. Not forgiveness, sir. Perspective. Lexi's expression remained composed, but her voice carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. We all make choices based on what we believe is right. The measure of a soldier of a person is what they do after those choices are revealed as flawed. Thomas nodded slowly. I'll take your recommendation under advisement. For what it's worth, Morgan, this unit will be poorer for your departure. Thank you, sir, but I go where I'm needed. As we all should, Thomas agreed. He rose, extending his hand. Good luck out there, Lieutenant. Come back safely. As Lexi left the office, she felt a sense of closure settling over her time at Camp Hawthorne. What had begun as an exile, a punishment she had imposed upon herself, had transformed into something unexpected, a journey back to herself. That evening, true to her word, Lexi attended Taylor's movie night in the recreation center. The initial awkwardness of her new status quickly dissolved into casual camaraderie as they watched an action film of dubious realism, with Taylor providing running commentary on the implausible tactics displayed on screen. That's not how breaching charges work, Taylor complained during a particularly egregious scene. Right, Lexi? Lexi smiled but said nothing, neither confirming nor denying her knowledge of such matters. Some aspects of her past would remain private, shared only with those who had lived them alongside her. As the evening wound down, Taylor walked with her back toward the barracks. So tomorrow's the big day, she said, her usual exuberance subdued. You ship out with the SEALs. Oh, 600, Lexi confirmed. Transport to Edwards, then overseas. Taylor hesitated, then asked the question that seemed to be on everyone's mind. Will you come back? After the mission, I mean. Lexi looked up at the desert night sky, stars brilliantly clear in the dry air. I don't know, she admitted. 3 years ago, I ran from who I was because I couldn't face the consequences of my decisions. Now I'm running towards something instead. Whatever comes next, I'll face it directly. Taylor nodded, understanding more than Lexi had given her credit for. Just don't forget you have friends here now. Real ones who know the real you. I won't forget, Lexi promised, and she meant it. Dawn broke over Camp Hawthorne for the last time in Lexi Morgan's current chapter. She stood in her barracks now, wearing the uniform of an intelligence officer rather than a logistics clerk. The transformation was complete in appearance, though in truth it had begun long before perhaps the moment Captain Blackwood had recognized her butterfly tattoo and offered that unexpected salute. She packed efficiently, years of deployment experience guiding her hands. When she reached under her mattress for her notebook of unsent letters, she paused, considering. After a moment, she placed it in her bag. The past would travel with her, not as a burden, but as a foundation for what came next. Outside, the transport vehicles waited, engines idling in the cool morning air. The SEAL team was already loading their gear, their movements precise and economical. Captain Blackwood stood apart, conferring with Captain Thomas, while Lieutenant Rivera supervised the loading process. As Lexi approached, she was surprised to find a small gathering of soldiers waiting near the vehicles. Staff Sergeant Marcus Daniels stood at their center, flanked by Taylor Rodriguez and, most unexpectedly, Lieutenant Wilson. We came to see you off, Marcus explained simply. Wilson stepped forward, his usual arrogance replaced by genuine contrition. Lieutenant Morgan, I owe you an apology. My conduct was unprofessional and my assumptions unfounded. Lexi studied him, seeing not the antagonist of recent months, but a young officer grappling with his own limitations. We all have blind spots, Lieutenant. The key is recognizing them before they endanger the mission. Wilson nodded, accepting both the implicit forgiveness and the gentle correction. Safe travels, ma'am. One by one, the soldiers offered brief farewells, some formal, others warm. Taylor hugged her impulsively, extracting a promise to write when possible. Sergeant Hayes, the man who had once mocked her tattoo before the entire formation, rendered a respectful salute. When the others had dispersed, Marcus remained. I have something for you, he said, holding out a small package. A deployment tradition in my family. Lexi unwrapped it to find a pocket compass, its brass case worn smooth by years of handling. Marcus, I can't take this. You can and you will, he insisted. My grandfather carried it through Korea, my father through Vietnam. I had it in Iraq. It always points home no matter how far you travel. The simple gift carried a weight beyond its physical presence, a connection to history, to family, to the concept of home that Lexi had denied herself for so long. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with unexpected emotion. I'll keep it safe. See that you do, Marcus replied. And when you figure out where you belong, Lieutenant Morgan, use it to find your way back there. A call from the transport interrupted the moment. It was time to go. With a final nod to Marcus, Lexi shouldered her bag and joined the SEAL team at the vehicles. Lieutenant Rivera helped her secure her gear. Ready for this? He asked quietly. Lexi looked back at Camp Hawthorne, at the place where she had hidden from herself for 3 long years. The sunrise painted the desert in gold and shadow, a canvas of possibility stretching to the horizon. She thought of Alex Cameron, of the butterfly he had drawn, of his final words to her. Remember who you were before. Yes, she said, touching the tattoo on her arm. I'm ready. As the convoy pulled away from Camp Hawthorne, Lexi Morgan sat straight-backed and clear-eyed, facing forward. The butterfly had emerged from its chrysalis, transformed, but carrying the memory of what came before. Whatever challenges awaited in those distant mountains, she would meet them not as the quiet logistics clerk or even as the intelligence officer she had once been, but as the person she had become, forged in loss, tempered by grief, strengthened by connection. The butterfly tattoo on her arm caught the morning sun, its black ink absorbing the light. What had once been a target of mockery had become a symbol of respect. Its true meaning finally understood. The soldiers of Camp Hawthorne would remember the quiet woman with the butterfly tattoo, the one they had underestimated and ridiculed, until the day a SEAL commander saluted her and everything changed. Some would tell her story as a cautionary tale about judging others too quickly. Some would spin it into legends of secret missions and classified heroism. The truth has always lay somewhere in between, in the quiet courage it takes to face one's failures, in the strength required to begin again after loss, in the wisdom to recognize that transformation doesn't erase what came before but builds upon it. In time, new soldiers would arrive at Camp Hawthorne, and with them new stories would emerge. But among the veterans who remained, a certain respect would be shown to those with butterfly tattoos, a silent acknowledgement of sacrifices made and burdens carried. And in moments of doubt or difficulty, they might remember Private First Class Alexis Morgan, who taught them that true strength isn't loud or boastful, but quiet, resilient, and often hidden in plain sight. As for Lexi herself, she carried Camp Hawthorne with her as she journeyed toward her next chapter, not as a place of exile, but as a waypoint in her journey home. The compass in her pocket pointed true north, but the direction of home was something she would have to determine for herself in the days ahead. The butterfly had taken flight at last. 2 weeks later, as dawn broke over the mountains of Afghanistan, Intelligence Officer Lieutenant Alexis Morgan stood on a rocky outcropping, surveying the terrain through high-powered binoculars. The valley below, not unlike the one where everything had changed 3 years earlier, lay shrouded in morning mist, concealing its secrets. Behind her, SEAL Team 8 prepared for the mission that would begin at nightfall. Captain Blackwood approached, joining her at the edge of the precipice. Anything, he asked quietly. Lexi lowered the binoculars, her expression thoughtful. Nothing obvious, but 3 years ago we missed the signs because we weren't looking in the right places. She gestured to a distant ridgeline. I want to check that area personally before we commit. Blackwood nodded, trusting her instinct. Take Rivera with you. Be back by 1600 for final briefing. As he walked away, Lexi touched the butterfly tattoo on her arm, a habit that had once been unconscious, but now carried deliberate meaning. She thought of Alex Cameron, of his sacrifice that night in this same harsh landscape, of Marcus Daniels and the compass that now rode in her pocket, of all the people and events that had shaped her journey to this moment. Lieutenant Noah Rivera joined her, his own butterfly tattoo visible beneath his rolled sleeve. Ready to be point again, Morgan. Lexi checked her equipment with practiced efficiency, her movements precise and confident. The ghosts of the past would always be with her, but they no longer controlled her path. She had returned to these mountains not to relive old tragedies, but to prevent new ones. To use her skills, her experience, her unique perspective to protect others from the shadows she had faced. Lead the way, she said, stepping forward into the future with clear eyes and an open heart. The butterfly had not only emerged, it had found its purpose in flight. And somewhere she knew Alex Cameron was smiling.